Sometimes our holy work of being there for another Jew, being there for another person, can make us feel depleted, or even that the spiritual standing that we're at beforehand, we actually got lower, and that it affected us negatively. And in this week's Parshas Chukas, we are learning the secret to shluchus, to being on a godly mission, to being involved in the community and other people's lives, and even within our own marriages. What happens when our giving or our compassion or our being there for our husbands, instead of it filling us up, it actually makes us feel like we're in a lower place than we were before. And often, sometimes people ask themselves, like, how much am I supposed to give of myself? Am I really supposed to connect to a place? Let's say, someone's husband is such a dark place. Am I really supposed to be there for him? What if I get sucked into the darkness also? Or, you're helping someone with such an intense topic, you might feel afterwards like, whoa, I was up here in the clouds and now I'm in a lower place. And so are we supposed to engage that way? And what is the way to be able to be there for the people we love the most, to be there for our family, for our community, in a way that really feels fulfilling and godly? So let's dive in. This is a Sikha from Likutei Sikhas, volume 4 of the Rebbe. So to start off, there are 3 categories of mitzvahs, of ways we can connect with God. So there's mishpatim, there's edus, and there's chukim. To explain each of a little bit, mishpatim are the rational mitzvahs. These are the mitzvahs like don't steal, don't kill. They make a lot of sense. It's a great idea. That's how you have a moral, civilized society. That's how you have a functioning world. They make sense to the human mind and intellect. Then you have edus. Edus, they make sense within a certain context. Within the context of God creating the world, having Shabbos, a day to acknowledge that, and all the mitzvahs around that, that makes sense within a certain context. Within the context of God taking us out of Egypt, Pesach makes a lot of sense. So it still appeals to the rationale, but it's not something that the human intellect would have come upon itself, like the idea of not stealing or not killing, which are just more inherently make sense. And then there's chukim. Chukim are super rational mitzvahs. Not that they're lower than intellect, they transcend intellect completely, meaning they do not come down and clothe themselves within the human mind. So with the other 2 categories of mitzvahs, they too transcend human intellect. But Hashem in His kindness allows His will and His wisdom to come down all the way to the point that they're actually enclosed within the human intellect, meaning they can apply to our rationale, and therefore we can connect to Hashem in this, kind of mind melt of Torah learning and learning about these mitzvahs and doing these mitzvahs. When it comes to chukim, they're just in the level of supernal will. So if we look at the 10 spheros, you have the idea of will, ratzon, keter, and underneath that is the idea of chachma, of understanding, of rationale. So they actually are the highest level of mitzvahs, if you will, chukim, because they are that level of connecting to God in a way of just His pure will. And that's connecting to a Jew's essence, which is this place of our will, our desire for God, and it's connecting to God's essence. God as He is His desire, for this mitzvah to happen. So this is completely transcending the realms of intellect. And this can be, in the Alter Rebbe's example, chukim are engraved letters. They're like hakika. They enter into the material itself. So when something is a mitzvah that we can understand, it's kind of like, the analogy is they are letters on top of parchment. There's a separation between God's will and the explanation, right? It's a little bit more diluted, a little bit more watered down for the human mind. Versus if you engrave something, right, it's one with the stone itself. So the chukim mitzvahs, they don't come down to intellect because they are one. They're like engraved in God's will. They are one with God's will, and so they actually offer a deeper level of connection. So one example of chukim is kosher, mikvah. So every level of chok, you still could appreciate the value, appreciate the inner meaning and the inner depths. But the central category of what it is shows that it's not about the fact that kosher makes sense. Does kosher make sense? That actually makes a lot of sense. Does mikvah make sense? 2,000%. But that's not what it's about. It's about the fact that it's God's will. That's the primary place of connection. And the mitzvah that we are going to be obsessed with and talking about and bringing about today is the mitzvah, which is the ultimate chok. It's actually called Chukas HaTorah, the chok of the Torah, and this is the Paraduma. So let's talk about the Paraduma. So simply put, the Paraduma is a way that if the person encounters tumas mace, which is the impurity of death, right? So they are burying someone, let's say, which is the mitzvah, to bury the dead in a kosher Jewish way. But in that act of, being there for another person and getting involved and bearing this person, they just encountered the most intense level of impurity. Because what is life? Life is purity, right? It's vitality, it's connection to divinity. And lack of life, right? Loss of life is most intense because that's being literally severed from one's connection. And so it represents the lack of life, and therefore the person who's involved in carrying the dead, what happens is they get this impurity transferred to them. And therefore they need a process to leave this impure state and come to a spiritual space of wholeness, to come to tahar, to come to a place of purity. And so this is a procedure that is done through something called the Red Heifer. The Red Heifer is literally a red cow, and they are extraordinarily rare. And there's a special procedure that the Torah outlines in this week's Parsha about, what are the specifications, if it's a red heifer or not, like every single hair being red. And from there, what happens is burning the cow and getting the ashes and grinding the ashes and this whole thing. And basically what happens is the person who is impure gets sprinkled with these ashes, and the person who sprinkled them, who's a Kohen, now becomes impure. So the idea that someone who purifies someone becomes impure, that's doesn't apply to the intellect. It doesn't make sense. Why it has to be a red cow, all of these things are just completely beyond human intellect. As King Schlumbo wrote in Koheles, right, the wisest of all people, Shlomo Melech, he wrote, he searched, he researched, he thought he was going to be able to grasp this mitzvah with his mind. He said, I will become wise, but it was distant from me. He was not able to grasp this mitzvah. In contrast, the only person who ever knew whatever was ever revealed to him, the truth of Paraduma, what is the inner hidden kavanah intention of this mitzvah, is nonetheless Moshe Rabenu. Moshe Rabenu says in Midrash Mabidbar Rabbah, to you, Moshe, I will reveal the reason, but for others it is a chok. Meaning Moshe is able to hold both the dimensions of this just being one with God's will, and also know the inner meaning, because Moshe Rabbeinu is just about the essence. He's not looking for any level of, I need to understand. He was able to just contain both. So Moshe Rabbeinu actually knows the secret. Okay, so when Moshe Rabbeinu first heard about this mitzvah, or the spiritual reality of tumas mace, that a person is going to actually contract the spiritual impurity by burying the dead, he fell on his face. He was like, how are we ever going to recover from that? How is someone ever going to come back from that level of purity? How are they going to regain their spiritual status of purity, which is going to allow them to serve in the temple and offer karbanos and interact with normal Jewish society? He was kind of freaked out by it, so to speak. And so Hashem showed him that there's actually going to be this system of Paraduma to take away the impurity of death, and that this is going to be completely above the normal course of order. Because the normal course of order is that if someone gets in contact with something that's so negative, there's no coming back. But Hashem created a system that's that transcends, and the red heifer is actually connected to the 13 attributes of mercy, which is our calling card with God. Whenever we need this attribute of mercy, we need to transcend the entire system. We call in Hashem's 13 attributes of mercy, and so this is connected to that. Also, this Paraduma is different than any other mitzvah in the fact that any other karban. So all the karbanos, all the offerings are done within the Beis Hamikdash, but here it's done outside of the Beis Hamikdash. That's unique. And the Kohen who goes and does this act, what happens? He's in a pure state. He's fully functioning, full-fledged Jew. And what happens? He goes to purify this person, and in the act, he becomes impure. So there's very unique aspects of this mitzvah that are important for us to know about. And we also want to understand, why is it so important? First of all that. So what does this actually mean? That the only one who can actually purify a person is God. God's essence alone. For a person to actually be able to have that transformation, it's not going to come from a place of intellect. It's not going to come from a place of intellect, because purity and impurity transcend intellect completely. They are chukim. And so this act of total self-transcendence, right? For a person to say, I'm in a good spiritual state, and I'm going to go down to your level, and I'm going to help you where you're at right now, and I'm going to become impure in that act, that is actually Zechukas HaTorah. This is the entire general principle of the Torah in this way, because what is the idea of the Torah? Is a Havas Yisrael, is to put ourselves out for another Jew, is to see another Jew so much as ourselves that we're actually willing to go there with them, to be in the space that they are in and feel what they're feeling and be with them in that space to the point that they become pure, to the point that they feel redeemed, to the point that they reach their personal gula. And this level of self-nullification, there's a reason that we got this mitzvah from Moshe Rabenu, because this is the level that Moshe Rabenu completely embodied, of just being completely there for his people. And so Moshe Rabenu was actually the one to grind the red heifer, and there's 10 batches of this red heifer goods. 9 have been used, and the 10th will be used by Mashiach to take us all out of this level of impurity so we can serve in the holy temple. This idea of it coming from Moshe Rabenu is this idea of where can I connect to this appreciation of being so in love with another Jew, so there for another Jew, that I'm willing to go to this place where I might get negatively affected, but I'm going there anyways because this is a mitzvah. That comes from Moshe Rabenu. It had to be that Moshe Rabenu was the one who knew the secret of this mitzvah, the one to grind these ashes, the one to inaugurate us into this level of our soul. We're able to be so there for another person that no matter what, we know that we're okay. That there's a level beyond pure and impure. There's a level of just purely being there for Hashem. I don't care what spiritual state I'm in. I'm doing this for Hashem because Hashem cares about this Jew. And that is actually the Yechid Hashem Nefesh. That is the level that transcends the entire system. Right? This is happening outside of the Beis Hamikdash. This is happening outside the normal rules. The normal rules is if you're impure, how are you going to get back? The only way Hashem you can get back is from a place of absolute essence. Returning to the part of you, then the truth can never become impurified because it's one with God. And that is the active connection that comes here. And that is the experience that the person has. They go to this person who's in an impure state. And they have to reveal the essence of God in that place through this mitzvah, Paraduma. And from there, they realize, wow, like there really is this place of beyond impure and impurity where they're just one with God's essence. And in that place, above the entire system, above even the system of the Beis Hamikdash, like literally above all spiritual and physical systems, in that place, where just God and a Jew, that person becomes purified. And now, of course, the person who did the sprinkling, right, who's a Kohen, they themselves need to be purified, right? They need to refuel. And so there's 3 different batches of this Paraduma ashes, okay? So there's one is used for purifying the impure. The second is used is for future red heifers, like set aside for future situations where this is going to need to be used. Another is set aside as a testimony, le mishmeres, and this is symbolizing that a person needs to remember, right? The Kohen who just became impure needs to remember, okay, you did a great job. You completely nullified yourself and put yourself on the line for another Jew, but now you need to go and get yourself back to a place of purity. You need to be back within the system where you can go to the Beis Hamikdash in a place of purity. You need to re-enter society. Like you had this spiritual high, but no, you need to go back and you need to focus on yourself. Maybe it wasn't a spiritual high. You had a spiritual low and you need to go back and refill your tank. So what can we take from this? There's so much to take from this. So basically, there's so many arguments, and the Rebbe says the Yetzer Hara is going to come and argue. You know, like why should you be the one to lower yourself? Why, if you see a Jew in a place of impurity, which let's take it to mean, you know, they're in a low spiritual space or a low emotional space, or they're in a, you know, a hard space in their relationships, or they're a hard space in their relationship with Shem, or maybe they're a hard person to be around, and their language or the way they come off, or their energy, their vibe, it's low vibe, right? And so we're going to say, why should I lower myself? That's what the Yetzer Hara is going to say. Why should I lower myself to that space? And remembering that, wait a second. Okay, so one more thing that the Yetzer Hara is going to say. The Yetzer Hara is going to quote our sages. It says, a person is never told to sin in order to enable a colleague to benefit. And what is that we're supposed to say? Back to our Yetzer Hara, Chukas Torah from Bamidbar, from this parsha, we're supposed to say this is the entire general principle of the Torah. The entire Torah is about being willing to spiritually sacrifice, to be there for another Jew, no matter what it takes, to get them back to a place of purity, back to a place of wholeness and connection to Hashem and their essence of their soul shining. That there's no greater thing than to sacrifice from that. And remembering, in this act, we're not just doing it alone, we're doing it connected to Moshe Rabenu. Moshe Rabenu is the one who has this soul capacity to completely transcend self and be there for another. And that's why this mitzvah was given from him. And we're not going alone, we're going with the belief of Moshe Rabenu. We're going with the belief of the Mashaleach, the one who is sending us on this soul mission. And so we're not doing this alone. And also this idea of afterwards, right, we have to refill. And so let's take this for a moment to the practical of this idea of filling up our cup, right? We want to help another Jew, right? Whether it be our child, whether it be our spouse, whether it be, someone in our life. And we might be looking at their spiritual standing or lack thereof in that moment and just say, why me? Like, why do I have to go into this space? And remember, first of all, if I'm going to go there, if I'm going to purify, I have to see them as the essence of their soul. I have to see them as a Jew, no matter what kind of impurity they're involved in. Hashem desires them to be in a place of connection with Him. Hashem desires that the essence of their soul be shining. And from that place, I'm actually going to be able to go in with eyes of purity and to not go in unfilled up, right? If I'm not filled up, how am I going to be there for another Jew? To go in to this mitzvah pure. To go in, with a smoothie that you just drank. To go in with positive self-talk, to go in, to the space after you've had that nap, to go and fill it up, to take care of yourself so you are in that place of purity going in. And knowing that, even if having so much compassion for my husband, it's going to leave me so drained. Don't be afraid of that. Even if, working so hard on believing in someone, it actually is just exhausting. I'm maybe I'm going to lose my steam. Don't be afraid of the voda. Moshe Rabenu is the one who's sending us in this. God is empowering us to step beyond all limitations of nature to do this. And even if we become impure through it, it's okay, right? To go, chaperone that Shabbaton for teens, and even if you come out saying a bad word because you were around teens all weekend, you're going to have the opportunity to re-purify. But the main thing is knowing that self-sacrifice that you did for other Jews, even if it had a negative effect on your spiritual status, the greatest spiritual status is being willing to sacrifice for another Jew. And so I really want to take this just to marriage for a moment. And that idea of, okay, but now I need to re-purify, right? So let's say, we're doing all this inner work, we're doing our Gula lives inner work, we're doing these skills. And a person can say, okay, why do I have to go to such a place, to really change my beliefs and to hear things that feel so negative from my husband or so hurtful and so painful, and do that work to transform and come back to that place of purity, but realizing, wow, Zeh Chukas Torah, to do our own work to connect to another Jew, it's the holies of holies, it's everything. It's beyond the holies of holies. It transcends the entire system. And knowing that it's okay if after we've given to our marriage and after we've given to the people that matter most to us in life or the causes we want to give to be able to take the moment and say, I need to get back to a place of purity. And that's the third level of what these ashes were preserved for. To just remind you, I also have to get back to a place of purity. I also have to get back to that place of seeing the goodness in myself and revealing the essence of my soul and connecting to Hashem beyond the entire system. And in practicality, this might mean naps and manicures and some shopping and listening to good music and journaling and girl time with friends. And after that Shabbaton that you lead for teenagers, just taking an entire afternoon off and just being and getting back to yourself and learning Torah and fueling yourself, whatever it means to get back to that place of wholesomeness. But the idea of that I can be wholesome and another Jew is not a place of wholeness, the idea that hurts us and that we want to go in and we want to be there for another person, that's the most natural Jewish feeling. And we're allowed to take pleasure in that, and we're allowed to feel good about that. And the fact that we want so badly to elevate those around us and to be there for them, it's such a powerful, holy thing. And to not doubt that and to not be afraid and to know that if that means I need to recharge more, that is totally part of the divine design. But to know that we're not going alone. We are empowered with this mitzvah of shluchus and caring and giving and nurturing. We're empowered with the mitzvah from Moshe Rabenu, and we can always connect back to the energy, and we can always take the time to get back into our place of purity so we can continue to give and to just enjoy that essential connection with Hashem. Thank you.